welcome you all. My name is Joana Costa and I'm with the Nova SBE Executive Education team. It is with great honor that I host you for today's webinar with Professor Martin Nasser, an Associate Senior Faculty at the Duke CE, at the Tuck Business School and at the Dartmouth College. Today, Professor Martin will explain to us why human resilience is the super competence. Agile, adapt, adjust, VUCA world, resilience are now the most used words in our daily lives. They are now more than complex concepts that we hear on TED Talks. Now they are the new reality. We at the Nova SBE, we continue to evolve with our initiative. We all have a role to play that wants to help you to understand your role in this paradigm shift. I invite you all to explore in detail the projects related with this initiative at rolltoplay.novasbe.pt. Just before we begin, some technical guidance. Please provide us with your questions using the Q&A tool that you can find on the bottom of your screen. And now, without further ado, I leave you with Professor Martin Nasser.
Thank you so much, Joanna. It's really nice to see you. I have such great and fond memories of the actual campus. I wish I could actually be there. So I'd like to share my screen right now, but somebody needs to release it. There we go. And I'll share with you my slides. I'll put them up here. I have questions. I have some downloads also for you later on, but it's a real pleasure to talk to you about human resilience, the super competence. So a quick overview. Let's talk about what it is. What is human resilience? What is a good definition, but also why a super competence and what is a super competence? Then we'll dive into the 5 basic ingredients. It's a bit like a menu, if you like. You first need to have the 5 basic ingredients before you can cook up human resilience, before you can start to embody what resilience really is. And once we've got that, we'll go into leadership resilience and later organizational resilience with the help of 6 domains of resilience. So quite a lot to cover, way too much to perhaps put it all in, but I hope you'll stay with us also for the Q&A. I'll stay on as long as I can, as long as you have questions for me. So here we go. Now, first and foremost, many of you like me here in the East Coast of the United States, your life was disrupted. The VUCA world, as Joanna was just saying, is upon us. I don't have to explain to anybody anymore what disruption really looks and feels like. Nevertheless, I'd love to hear from you. And the 3 pictures here represent the question of how you are doing. Are you doing okay? Saying everything is possible. You are like the picture on my left, pulling away the I and the M from possible. So everything is possible and the sun is rising. Or are you more cautious and you are washing your hands? You are making sure that you are safe. And perhaps you are, like I definitely was back in March, stuck in the mud. I didn't know which way to turn. I didn't know what was happening with me. So Pedro, if you could launch the poll, I'd love to hear from you. It's a simple poll. How are you doing? And the 3 possibilities are right there. If you just jump in now, I see at least 38, 39 people now, and there's the voting off to the races. Love it. What? Nobody's stuck in, oh yeah, thankfully 1 person still good stuck in the mud. I appreciate that. 24, 25, 26 answers. That is great. I'll give you a few more seconds to answer, please. How do you feel? Very glad to see there. We've got 29, 30, few more perhaps, and then we'll close the poll and we'll get the result. Get it there in. Yeah, 31. Thank you so much. This is always good fun. Thanks for your participation. Let's share the results there. And there we go. 70% of you are optimists. A very important part of resilience, as we will see. I certainly am a born optimist. So that's when I started to create a course on human resilience way back in March. But I also sympathize with folks who say, you know, this is not my real life. I have a daughter. She just graduated from her college, and of course there was no graduation party, and she had to do it all virtually on screen. Now it was quite an event, actually an emotionally charged, lovely, beautiful event, but she was alone by herself in a dorm room, and other friends were in other dorm rooms, and they were all separated. So it was sad, and I sympathize with those who still feel, you know, I'm a little stuck. I don't know which way to turn. Perhaps this quick webinar can give you some ideas. So thank you for sharing. Here's then, what is resilience? And I've taken it from a friend of mine from Australia, Jury Rosso, who writes that it's really, if you have to find a definition, it is advancing despite adversity. And I'll try my Portuguese here. I apologize, it's terrible. But here it is, avanzando a pesar da adversidade. How's that? It's the best I can do. I'm originally Dutch. Maybe if some of you speak Dutch, I'll improve my Portuguese. But I like that because we all know that in our lives, there is really no life without some adversity. We all run into trouble at some point in time. Something will happen. So I feel like you, if we don't have adversity, perhaps we haven't really challenged ourselves at our core. So we need to advance despite adversity. I like that definition best. Then what is a super competence? Well, I wrote it down here for you, but also underneath it, look at the equation. Human performance, or your performance, equals your potential minus the interference. Isn't it true that as humankind, we often interfere with our own potential? We stop being effective either for emotional distress or physical distress, or not wanting to learn something new. Not easy to admit, but it happens to all of us, that sometimes we are stuck. And certainly a super competence then helps us to get better, not just at resilience, but at any and all other abilities, if you'd like, skills, if you'd like, that we need in order to work, manage, lead, and find a fulfilling life. It helps us, as it reads here, to become better at almost anything that we know, learn, and do, and helps us to reduce that interference. So let me just quickly check as well. I see the chat box. If there's an hello. Thank you, Nuno, to join us. I'll check on occasion with the chat box as well. So the basic ingredients is the next topic. And that's really all about how do you create that menu, if you'd like, of inputs that one requires as a human being in order then to become resilient. And it's going to be a full screen, but I start with this equation. It is near and dear to me. It comes from action learning, business-driven action learning, and it reads L has to be greater than RC. Now, if I tell you that RC stands for the rate of change, the rate of change, and I ask you, what is it for you on a scale of 1 to 10? What is the rate of change right now for you on a scale of 1 to 10? Just put it into the Q&A box if you'd like. You can choose any number on the scale of 1 to 10, and we'll take a look at what comes up. I see there a 10. It's pretty high, Constanza. Thank you so much. Who else? Who else has a number in mind of the rate of change with which they are currently operating? I see some there in the 7.5, very precise. I like that. The digits 8, 8.5, pretty big, pretty high for all of us. I sympathize with you. All I want to point out with that the L now stands for learning. So if the rate of change is, say, a 7.5 or an 8.5 or an 8, like some of you are saying, then the learning has to be greater than that. Your learning has to improve and empower over the rate of change. Otherwise, the rate of change takes control of your life, and that is not a happy place. You'll be overwhelmed. The second step, of course, I already alluded to that. We've got to have a growth mindset, not just a fixed mindset, A fixed mindset is where intelligence is a bit static. We know what we know and we think it's enough. Now, I assume many of you are like my good friends at Nova, learners, and you want to learn ever more. You know that a growth mindset, and this comes from a book from Carol Dweck, as you can see, it was 2006, such a long time ago, but still so relevant. A growth mindset is about growing and learning. It is about embracing challenges. It is about, of course, facing adversity and criticism, but learning from it, seeing feedback as a way to learn more. And as Satya Nadella, you may have heard of him or read about him, the CEO of Microsoft, said recently, I want a team not of know-it-alls, people who know everything already. And you know those people who, in conversation with you, constantly say, I know, I know, I know. I can't stand those people. But when there are people who want to learn it all and who say, that's interesting, I didn't know that, or I heard it, but I didn't know how to place it. Thank you. Those are the growth mindset people. That's what we need. The second ingredient for our human resilience menu. The third then is based on a wonderful book by Angela Duckworth. You may have heard of it or read it perhaps. It's about grit. It is quite controversial, particularly in the academic field, but she essentially says, look, grit is about passion and perseverance. You've got to be gritty. You've got to want to reach a long-term goal. And then resilience is the optimism that helps you bounce back if you seem to be failing to reach that goal. So grit is the how-to. Later on, we'll call that tenacity as well. Following then, number 4 is the inner game. Now that I find the most fascinating piece of all of resilience, but I will say a little further, even learning and development. I learned a lot. Yes, I have degrees in law and business. Really, it didn't mean anything in comparison to what I learned playing sports. And Tim Galway, if you haven't heard of him, his best known book was The Inner Game of Tennis. He talks about the inner game because he was a coach of tennis players after he stopped his otherwise regular career in tennis. And he started to see that whenever he wanted to make a tennis player better in the game of tennis, he had to not work on the game of tennis, but the inner game of the player, the game that plays within your mind, the conversations that you have with yourself. And even athletes today talk about being in the zone. And when they're in the zone, Tim Galway explains to us that you are both performing, you are learning, and you're enjoying both. So there is that sense of optimism. It's performing, learning, and enjoyment. And Tim points out that that requires a deeper sense of self-awareness and control over that awareness. Same sense of control as in self-confidence. You have your own back. You are your own best friend, your own best confidant within that inner discussion that you have. And the last thing that I'd like to point out in the inner game is you have a free and conscious choice to decide who you are, where you're going to go, and what you want to do with your life. And I think the inner game is a fascinating, incredibly important ingredient to becoming and thinking about human resilience. Last but not least, we wouldn't be humans if we don't want to talk about control. So I'll flip to the next slide. There you have the 5 basic ingredients, and I'll let a little video run. And basically, I recorded myself some time ago when I was facing some adversity. And I took a piece of paper, and feel free to do this as we talk. Take a piece of paper, put a line through it, a blue line in this case. And then above the blue line, write what I can't control. What I can't control. That's as simple as it is. Underneath the blue line, write, of course, the opposite, which is what I can control. So when you face some adversity, when you are stuck and you don't really know where to go, this is a marvelously super simple exercise that resilient people do all the time. And what happens after a while, you start to write, you start to empty your mind on what I can't control. And what I can't control, here's some example, an example of my own after I did this not too far away. I hope you can read it. On the top, it says things like, I can't control other people's feelings and emotions. I can't control what people think of me. I can't control my entire future. I can't control other people's decisions, or my favorite was, I can't control world events that mess up my life and career right now because of the COVID pandemic, of course. But then below the line, I started writing, I can control what I focus on here today. I can control how I respond to people. I can control where I put my energy. I can control what things mean to me, what scares me, what my emotions are going to be like, what I value, what I stand for, and what I go for. And it gave me a sense of unburdening. I felt more relieved. I felt more capable of dealing, let's say, with the adversity that we sometimes face. So much about the 5 ingredients. Then let's look at leadership resilience, and I'll introduce the 6 domains of human resilience in this way. Let's say that your world currently may look a little bit upside down. It's a little bit out of sorts. It's at least a new view, like you see here in the palm of your hand, where you're looking at the skyline, but it seems a bit out of sorts to you. Also, your one finger is really, really large and swollen, apparently. I love these kinds of pictures. But what if you've recognized that and you realize, okay, now what do I do? So you want to get out, you want to get off the highway, and you take the resilience exit. Now that sounds very nice, but how do you actually get going? And therefore you need the 6 domains of human resilience. And here's number 1, quickly described then in this way. The first domain is your self-awareness and your purpose. You have to develop purpose. Now that's easier said than done. It takes quite a few years. It takes quite a few good and bad experiences, but it starts with your self-awareness, a self-image and a self-knowledge that is positive, that is optimistic, that helps you. You help others, they help you to understand where you stand, what you stand for, and where you want to go. We'll come back to that in greater detail. The second domain of human resilience is health and safety. Now, health is obviously nutrition, exercise, and sleep. Safety is also doing safe things for yourself. But I'd like to point out, in organizations, we have to think about psychological safety. There is gender tensions, there are racism tensions. All too much now, we see it everywhere. We have not done a good job in our organizations, and perhaps even in our private lives, to create psychological safety for us and for others, to secure balance, but also equality around us. We'll come back to that one as well. Then there is emotional agility, and I just need to point out what it states here. Emotions determine about 85% of our habits. Whatever we do every day is defined by the feelings that we have about doing it. Whether we like the feeling or not, like taking out the garbage, I do that regularly, but it doesn't make me feel good. However, it's an emotional habit. Why? Because I know it's good for the family to get rid of the trash every day. Now, that requires me feeling well, me feeling what I'm feeling, and being intelligent about what these emotions truly mean and knowing how to use them. Of course, we're talking truly about emotional intelligence here. Then the opposite of that sometimes, as it's perceived by psychologists, but certainly in business, I find there's a sort of a preference for planning and reasoning. Number 4 of the domains of human resilience. It's all about deductive reasoning and pattern recognition. Doesn't that strike you as IQ? That's exactly how we measure IQ. Deductive reasoning, pattern recognition. And then we call people smart if they have high IQ. They could be terrible at EQ or emotional intelligence, but we nevertheless call them smart. Luckily, that's changing a little bit. So even in planning and reasoning domain now, I add things like pursuing opportunities or seeing scenarios. I just did an online scenario planning exercise with a company in India earlier today. And it works. It is possible. We have to therefore work hard on resilience in planning and reasoning. The last two, collaboration. What can I say? Without anybody else, I can't learn. Without collaboration, getting feedback, feed forward, looking for trust, being in a team, succeeding in a community, establishing societal values, even organizational values, all about learning, all about collaboration. The last one we touched upon is about grit, if you'd like. We call it drive and tenacity here. So we add determination, we add that longer term goal that we drive towards, and we add, of course, perseverance, as Angela Duckworth did, and passion. So there you have those 6 domains of human resilience are, if you'd like, playgrounds where we have to operate. Now, I put that in a slide that is very full, and I'm going to pass through it, but I wanted you to have it for if you want to think about these domains and have some self-reflective leadership questions, as well as some questions about your organization. But I'll only show it as I do here now. I'm not really going to talk through it. Too much words on a slide anyway. So I'll end with a slide that has more pictures in each one of these domains. The first one, as I said, we've got to take time out from our busy lives and find some space to think and talk to ourselves about, why do I do what I do? How do I uniquely exist as a human being? What do I want to leave behind, perhaps? What do I want to impact other people with? That requires a sense of the future and a sense of my core values myself. I love these 2 pictures that I borrowed from my friends at tomorrowtoday.com, fantastic futurists that say, you know, the reality is that we don't see the world as the world is. We see the world, and therefore reality, as we are. We hold up a mirror of ourselves and we think that's the world. And as this picture shows, nothing could be further from the truth. So find reality as it is, not as you are. Quickly going into health and safety, I think that's no surprise from an organizational perspective, the picture on the right. Think about a culture that is created by rewards. What kind of culture do you get if that's how you want to reward people? Do you get out of the culture the sense of belonging, the sense of togetherness? And we live in tensions in corporations in that regard. The other side I find equally important. Nutrition, exercise, and sleep, as I said, bring us performance, vitality, and energy. And that gives us health. Not thinking about that like a professional, not acting like it like a professional, including sleep like a professional, is just not good enough. You will not become resilient. Actually, you'll pretty much become exhausted. Many of us, certainly before COVID-19, we exhausted ourselves. I was one. Joanna will attest. She's seen me at my worst at the end of long trips across the world, landing up in your beautiful campus in outside of Lisbon. And luckily, I had a few days to recover. But life can be grueling if you have a day-to-day travel job. Then emotional agility, as I said, I'll put in the 2 pictures. They are counterbalance of each other, emotional intelligence, as well as, of course, IQ or planning and reasoning. They need equal space. They need equal dedication in our learning. And oftentimes we don't. We don't learn enough about our emotions. In other words, we don't think hard enough about our emotions. And we don't emote hard enough around what we think. There again, it is a tension, a dilemma, I suppose, that human resilience people resort to and then resolve. Collaboration, we talked about. Obviously, we have to mention trust. And I'd like to always think in my consulting and teaching work about the triangle. The triangle here, I say it's the regulator, if you want the government, society, if you want customers, like you and like others. And then our company. It could be our university, it could be our business school, but it could be a corporation as well. And thinking about collaborating between the three of them is incredibly important. We don't do it enough. We shut one of them out. We abuse society as a company sometimes. Sometimes the regulator abuses the company. It is very silly. We should be equal parts. That's collaboration. Resilient people, resilient leaders do exactly that. Last but not least, then we come to, if I can click it, there it is. And I see Elsa. Elsa, you raised your hand. Can we hear her, or can we see you in the chat? How do I do this? I don't know where Elsa has gone. Oh wait, there's a chat here.
Martin,
yes.
Elsa can put her question through the Q&A. It's easier if she wants to.
Very well. Thank you, Joanna. Yeah, that is a good idea. Elsa, if you could do that, then we'll come back to that question, and I'll finish with this slide. I have one more to go, and then we're all ready. So thank you, Elsa, for raising hand. Hope the question remains. The last one, drive and tenacity, as you can see, is really about two things. Yes, it's about mental toughness and its components, but it's also about grabbing every moment that matters in your life. Every day when you have a moment where you think you could have impact on somebody else, try it out, give it a chance, create this space. A moment passes and you left it not to matter. That is unfortunate. We do have impact on others. We are a counterbalance to others. Let's make more sense out of moments that matter. It's in the same way that all of you could be thinking of a conversation that truly counts, not just for you, but also to the person that you'd like to converse with. It requires patience. It requires time. It requires space. But how many of these conversations do you rehearse? Resilient people tell me they rehearse conversations all the time. They plan it in their heads. They look for the scenarios and the angles that they could take. And that creates their ability to respond in the moment, in the conversation, in a way that they want the conversation to go. And it helps them to stay within themselves. So incredibly important part, moments that matter and conversations that count. I'll end with the final slide of the deck. Again, on the left side, you see this 6 domains of resilience. But if you, for a moment, focus on the graph on the right, this was during the crisis, the financial crisis of 27 and 28. And there, these 3 authors that wrote Strategy Beyond the Hockey Stick, published by Wiley in 2018, and then it was put into an article by McKinsey as well, from which I got this graph. They divided a group of companies into non-resilient companies and resilient companies. And they compared them over a 10-year period. And as you can see in the light blue, compared to the S&P 500, the Standard & Poor's 500 measure of stock value, basically shareholder value over time, you can see the resilient organizations were far more value-based than the non-resilient and even the S&P 500. Now, what caused that? You can read on the left side. If we organize it by the 6 domains of resilience, then these companies, number one, immediately looked at their company purpose for direction. They made sure people were safe, that people were psychologically willing and able to commit and provide insights, new insights. People that never spoke in the organization suddenly turned out to have the best ideas. So there was authentic information sharing. Emotionally speaking, some people were stuck in a rut. They were afraid that they would get fired. So there was a lot of empathy and a lot of sense of belonging within those companies. Everybody was communicated to transparently and regularly. In planning and reasoning, there was a calm amongst the leaders. They would respond regularly. They would communicate regularly. They would give authority to others to make decisions such that decisions were made quickly. They collaborated with a network of teams, a nerve center, if you'd like, of teams at every level. It wasn't just the senior leaders. I see a lot of companies today, only the senior leaders seem to be busy. They seem to be so busy making decisions, doing things, and they don't involve the enormous wealth of the, may I call it, the others, the bottom of the pyramid somehow, who don't have the power, but have the best ideas internally as well as externally. And of course, optimism, persistence, perseverance, all the things that we put underneath resilience earlier in the ingredients are also playing a role. So the last slide certainly proves that resilience is a super competence. It's certainly one that gets companies out of trouble. It gets leaders to embrace the bigger questions that they may have about themselves as well as their role. Who am I to lead a company? And with that, I have a small gift if you're interested. I created a big course, about 2.5 hours. What is it? 10 chapters, 27 lectures. Should you be interested, special for Nova SBE, there's a 25% discount, but also there's a free download and you can follow the instructions and it will be repeated later on, I was told, in the chat. If you go to this website and you scroll down, you don't have to actually enter the website or enter anything specific, but if you scroll down, you'll find this particular ad, which indicated this webinar. And if you click on that, you will be able to download the 6 domains of resilience and the 23 habits and traits that I've recovered from various sources, that I've elicited from interviews with what I call resilient people. So a gift for me. Hopefully it will be helpful. Of course, you can reach out to me through my friends at Nova if you have further questions. But let's have some questions. Obrigado, I can say, as one of my final Portuguese words. But please, do you have any questions for me? And remember, the questions should be posed in the Q&A. And not in the chat forum. So if you have questions, please feel free. I hope I'm not too much over time, but let me know and I will live here answer some of your questions. I see here one from Mario. Rita, I assume L is something internal to the individual that we can measure, that goes to the L is greater than RC. This is true, of course, Mario. Who knows when you've learned something? But frankly, I find that when you've learned something and you are able to sense what you've learned, put words to it, and subsequently share that with somebody else, it becomes real. It becomes measurable. Somebody else indeed says, oh, thank you. I get that now. I've heard that. So hopefully that was helpful. Any other question? Please feel free.
Martin, so we are way ahead of our time, unfortunately. But we have one question, and I promise to you all the questions that remain to be answered. Martin will kindly answer it if it is by an email or so no one will be left without an answer.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. So the question is, how would you advise us to work on self-knowledge and propose in a moment so demanding when we are being called to respond in some fronts at the same time? If this is so hard for individuals, how can companies do it well besides focusing on what they can really control?
Yeah, that's a very good one. There's a lot of pieces and parts. So self-knowledge and self-image go hand in hand and form self-confidence. And how do you create self-confidence? Well, first and foremost, the self-image of yourself has to improve. You have to be slightly more, well, let's call it open to see yourself for who you are. I don't mean just outside, but also inside. Then the self-knowledge is truly about that inner game. How do I think harder about myself and feel even more perhaps deliberately who I am. Now, if we transfer those two, the self image and the self uh, knowledge, into an organization, then we have to do the same thing. Uh, what is the image that the organization has? Well, frankly, we'd have to go outside. We have to ask somebody to come in and say, what do you see? What do you sense? Do we do that? Well, we hire consultants and we pay them ridiculous fees. I say, hire an anthropologist. Ask them to spend a day with you and look around the building and look at the interaction, and they will give you a different image. The same with self-knowledge. Obviously, the best companies in the world are this close to their customers. They're constantly asking, am I doing it right? Could I do more? What is killing you? What is stopping you from from reaching your full potential? And how can I help? How much time do you spend on those bigger questions? That's what makes you more resilient, because otherwise you are basically working above the line of what you can't control, trying to control it, instead of saying, as a leader, I can't control everything, but what I can control is indeed my self-image, and I can improve my self-knowledge for myself as well as the leader that I am, and certainly for the organization. Organizations will go through a big change, I am sure, and resilient organizations will get up and will say, we've got to reorganize ourselves. The pyramid, as we used to know it, has to maybe be inverted, right? And that will hopefully inspire people to have better relationships, get more innovative, create more diversity around them. And that's what I would call a resilient organization. I hope that's a beginning, but feel free to ask us more. Sorry about the time span that I've run over.
Don't worry, Martin. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time to answer any more questions, but we will answer you by email, by otherwise we you don't will be left without an answer. Don't worry. Thank you all for joining us today. For this week, we have one more webinar that I invite you all to come and assist. It is about innovation management for business results. I hope to count on you on this webinar. Until then, I hope you stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you and goodbye.